Hello and welcome back. Now we're going to speak to an author about his new novel right now, which talks about resisting categorization and his allergy to conflict between cultures. Mohsin Hamid is the author of The Last White Man, a novel about white Americans who wake up dark-skinned. And I'm pleased to say, as I said, he joins us now. Mohsin, good to have you with us. It's an interesting concept for the book. Just tell us a little bit about it.
So the novel begins with a young man named Anders in an unnamed country who wakes up dark. And when he went to bed the evening before, he wasn't. And this predicament starts to spread.
Mm-hmm. And it's sci-fi. It's basically, it goes around and people, do they go from white to black? Do they go the other way around as well?
Well, we don't know. And I think, partly what the novel does is it makes the reader imagine things. And it gives some hints as to how you can imagine. Mm-hmm. But what you wind up imagining comes at least partly from you. And so the novel, I guess, is inviting readers to make stuff up and then see how that makes them feel.
And it's about how we are, I guess, present ourselves in the world and how the world sort of puts things upon us.
Yeah, I think it begins from the idea that, that race is an imaginary thing. We kind of made it up. It doesn't actually exist. It's not like a waterfall or a planet.
Categorizations that were put in place.
Yeah, this stuff has been invented upon us. And so what happens if we stop being able to see it? What happens if we can't tell what race people are? Mm-hmm. What do we do? That's what the novel explores. Give
us some of the inspiration, because when I saw the novel and I read sort of the précis of it, I was reminded of a work of non-fiction, Frantz Fanon's Black Skin, White Mask, which is this idea of categorization and who we are and how the world sees us. Was that an inspiration for this work?
Well, I mean, Fanon is obviously somebody that I read and had a big impact when I was a young man. In a way, one of the inspirations was what happened to me, after 9/11 as a 30-year-old, brown-skinned, Muslim-named man. Living in a city like New York and university-educated with a good income, I didn't encounter that much discrimination, I suppose, before. There was some, mm-hmm. but it went to an entirely different level, almost overnight. And I hadn't changed, but in a sense, the way I was being imagined by other people had changed. And that idea sort of lodged in me that it's possible to sort of radically reimagine one's race or have it reimagined upon you. So what if it went the opposite direction? What if somebody like Anders woke up and had this happen to him?
And without spoilers, how does Anders handle that?
Well, Anders first doesn't want to believe it's happening. He wants to think that it hasn't happened, or that it won't make a big deal, or that he's the same person. But what he begins to discover is that even though he is the same person, he isn't, because the way you're seen by others does start shaping how you act, and he begins to act quite differently.
I mean, are we trying to get in this novel to the point where race doesn't matter anymore, or are you telling us something else, that it massively does matter and still will do going forward? Well,
a bit of both. I mean, I think race is something that we need to imagine our way out of. I think it's an incredibly pernicious idea that flattens people and puts them in categories that are sort of made up. That said, it's real. Because we believe in it, it does things in our world. So what the novel does is it allows the reader to go into a slightly uncomfortable place where they have to imagine what's going on. They have to see how that makes them feel. They have to sit with it. And then they have to deal with their responses. It's, I guess, an invitation to go into your own imagination and see how things shape you.
I mean, what are your reflections on the way that society is right now? You talked about the way that you felt you were treated post 9/11. What about right now in 2022? How does it feel being in the world as you?
Well, I think that for a long time I imagined that things were going to get better. That, in fact, we lived in a world where racism would reduce, where inequality would reduce, where the environment would get better, etc. I'm 51, and so for the first 30, 35, 40 years, maybe it was possible to believe that. But increasingly, it's become hard to have that kind of optimism. It seems that, in fact, maybe we were at sort of peak good environment or peak progressive ethos some time ago.
When, around 2008?
Well, yeah.
Barack Obama, the arc of history bends to the good, that was his famous...
I think that's right. I think when Obama was elected, there was a feeling that things were going in a particular direction. And subsequent events have suggested that that's not the case. The rise of sort of strongman leaders all over the place, the continued environmental degradation, and the rise of overtly racist discourse in many places. And so I think that it's very dangerous to be pessimistic about this stuff. I think we have to kind of find our way to an optimistic viewpoint. And that's going to be a kind of critical optimism. So that's what we're trying to do.
OK, so expand on that. We don't have much time, but how do you get to that optimistic point? Because what you're saying is like you've taken the words right out of my head.
So, a very brief thing, if you aren't optimistic, you wind up being nostalgic. If you're nostalgic, your politics becomes, let's go back to how things were. How things were was rarely very good. To escape that, you have to say, you know, how might things be? How might we want them to be? You know, how do we get there? And the novel tries to do a little bit of that. It tries to say, you know, what other way is there of living? How might that be? What is the, in a sense, racial apocalypse where everybody becomes brown? And maybe that racial apocalypse isn't an apocalypse at all. Maybe it's the beginning of something, you know, better.
It's an opening and awakening. Mohsin Hamid, I could talk to you all morning, but we don't have the time. Love to speak to you. Mohsin, your book is out now. It's called The Last White Man. It's available in all good bookstores and online, I'm sure. Love to speak to you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.